Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. Today we're looking at Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson. I mean, on paper, it was the ultimate clash, right? YouTuber turned boxer going up against a straight-up legend.
A clash of generations, clash of styles.
But even before the first bell, there was this feeling like something just wasn't quite right. And after the fight, well, let's just say that feeling intensified. So we've got articles, reactions from all over the boxing world, even rumors of a no uppercut clause floating around out there. And we are going to get to the bottom of this whole thing. Was this a real fight or was this a carefully orchestrated show?
Yeah, let's jump right into it.
Let's do it.
I think the best place to start is probably with the fight itself. I mean, Paul won pretty decisively, which, given the age difference, wasn't a total shock. But the way he won and some of the stats from the fight, they've got a lot of people talking, scratching their heads.
Yeah, like the fact that Tyson, Iron Mike, the king of the knockout, only landed 18 punches the entire fight. I mean, 18 punches, that's not a lot, especially
Right.
for Tyson. And then you look at the judges' scorecards, 80-72, 79-73, 79-73, all for Paul. Makes you wonder what was really going on in that ring.
Yeah, those scores definitely point to a one-sided fight, which for a lot of people just didn't match up with Tyson's reputation. And I think to really unpack why this fight's causing so much debate, we got to talk about the uppercut.
Oh, yeah, you got
So anyone who isn't super familiar with boxing, the uppercut's that punch that comes from below, often catches an opponent off guard. And it was one of Tyson's signature moves, especially back in his prime. It was brutal, and it won him a lot of fights.
Wouldn't have a lot of knockouts.
Yeah, exactly. But in this fight, we just didn't see it. And that's where things get interesting.
Yeah, this is where things get really interesting. So Michael Irvin, NFL Hall of Famer, was on Colin Cowherd's show, The Herd, and he basically just came right out and said maybe there was something in the contract, some clause that prevented Tyson from using the uppercut. He even said, if that's in the contract, then come on, guys. Why wouldn't Mike Tyson throw an uppercut? He didn't hold back.
Yeah, Irvin's comment really cuts to the heart of this whole controversy. If one of the fighters can't use a key part of their arsenal,
Yeah.
can you really call it a fair fight? It makes you question the whole integrity of the match. But, got to say it here, we don't actually know if such a clause existed.
Right.
It's all speculation right now, but it's definitely fueled a lot of the post-fight talk.
Oh, yeah, for sure. All speculation, but it definitely gets you thinking. And then you've got Jake Paul. Right after the fight, he comes out and says, I didn't want to hurt someone that didn't need to be hurt. Which, on the surface sounds respectful enough. But knowing Paul and the way he is, you got to wonder if it wasn't more about protecting his image, keeping that whole unstoppable thing going.
Oh, for sure. It all comes back to his brand. I mean, think about it. His whole career is built on defying expectations. And beating Tyson, even an older Tyson, adds to that.
Oh, definitely.
But going too hard, maybe even knocking out a legend like Tyson, that could backfire. Turn off some fans, maybe hurt his chances of getting those big money fights in the future.
So was he really being respectful? Or was it a calculated move? And what about that bow? The bow right before the final bell, what was that about? I mean, really, was he trying to show respect or was that a little wing to the controversy?
Yeah, I mean, that bow, it's really up for interpretation. It could be genuine. It could be part of the whole show. I mean, it's classic Jake Paul. Keep everyone guessing.
Totally. And you know what? Speaking of keeping people guessing, a lot of the boxing experts are now saying this should be the end for Tyson. Like, he should hang up the gloves and move into coaching or something.
Yeah, I think there's definitely this feeling out there that Tyson's legacy is at stake. I mean, he's a legend, no doubt about it. But these fights, especially against opponents like Jake Paul, they risk tarnishing that legacy. Every fight just brings up the same question. Is he doing this for the love of the sport, or is it something else? And for some people, this fight with Paul, it kind of answered that question.
Yeah, and then you have Nico Ali Walsh, Muhammad Ali's grandson, coming out swinging. He didn't hold back, called Paul an embarrassment to the sport, said he was choosing spectacle over genuine competition.
And, his words carry a lot of weight, not just because he's a rising boxer, but because of that connection to boxing royalty. I mean, it really highlights the tension between, those who want to preserve the traditions of boxing and those who see it as a platform for entertainment and self-promotion.
Yeah, it's like this battle between the old guard and the new guard, and this fight really brought that battle to the forefront.
It definitely did.
All right, so we've got this clash of personalities, this clash of values, and all these questions swirling around this fight. But the big question, the one everyone wants answered, is was it rigged?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I think, before we go any further, we got to be clear. We don't have any concrete evidence of a fix.
Right.
But when you look at everything we've talked about, the low punch count,
Mm-hmm.
the speculation about the no uppercut clause,
Yeah.
Paul's comments after the fight, it's easy to see why some people are suspicious.
Yeah, it all adds up to a pretty compelling narrative. Even Colin Cowherd, and he's not exactly known for holding back his opinions,
That
chimed in and said, by the fifth round, Jake Paul had a chance, and I wonder if he said, I'm not going to humiliate him. Like, did that really
It
happen?
really gets to the heart of it, right?
Yeah.
Was there a moment where Paul decided to let up, maybe out of respect for Tyson? Maybe
Ah.
because the script called for it? And if so, what does that say about the fight?
Yeah.
It makes you wonder what fans are really watching. Is it a genuine athletic competition, or is it a performance?
It's a slippery slope, isn't it? Like, if fans start to think all these big fights are predetermined, it could really damage their trust in the sport.
Oh, absolutely. And it's not just about the fans either. Think about the fighters who are working their way up, putting in the blood, sweat, and tears. If the big fights are seen as rigged, it devalues all their hard work.
It raises a lot of questions about where the line is between putting on a show and keeping the integrity of the sport intact.
Yeah. Where do you draw that line?
It's a tough one.
It's a complex issue.
It really is.
And I think it's something we need to be talking about openly and honestly. This Paul Tyson fight, all the controversy, the speculation, it's brought all these issues to the surface. It's forcing us to ask ourselves, what do we want boxing to be?
Yeah. I mean, do we want it to be about pure athletic competition? Or are we okay with it becoming more like professional wrestling, where the outcomes are already decided and it's all about the entertainment value?
That's the debate we need to be having. And it's not just about boxing either. It's a question that applies to other sports too.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
As technology changes, media evolves, the lines between sport and entertainment are getting blurrier.
We're seeing it in esports and MMA, even in basketball and football. The focus on spectacle, on creating these viral moments, it's changing the way we experience sports.
And with that shift comes a whole new set of questions about ethics. How much manipulation is acceptable? At what point does entertainment overshadow the competition itself?
Yeah, tough questions.
Tough questions, and I don't think there's one right answer.
So where does all this leave us? I mean, we've got this fight, the Paul Tyson fight, which has sparked this much bigger conversation about boxing and the role of entertainment in all sports, really.
Yeah, we've looked at the reactions, the Ali family's perspective, the rigging allegations. Now we're grappling with these larger implications. It's complicated, it's messy, and I think it's safe to say this fight's going to have a lasting impact on the sport.
Yeah, it's a turning point for sure. But here's what I'm wondering. What do you think about all this? If you could ask Jake Paul or Mike Tyson one question about this fight, what would it be? Would you want to know if there was a no uppercut clause? Why Tyson seems so hesitant?
What's your burning question? We're all ears.
And while you're thinking about that, think about any other deep dives you want us to tackle. We're always looking for interesting topics, controversial events, anything that gets people thinking and talking.
Yeah, but we love a good challenge.
We do. We love to dive deep. But before we go, there's one more angle I think we should explore. You know, we've talked about the potential downsides of this fight, the questions it raises about the future of boxing.
But what if, and hear me out on this, what if this whole thing, even with all the controversy, could actually be good for boxing?
Okay, I'm listening. How could a fight that so many people see as damaging to the sport, how could it actually be beneficial?
Well, think about how many people tuned in to watch this fight. People who maybe don't normally follow boxing.
That's true. I mean, this fight was everywhere. My social media was blowing up.
Exactly. And that's where the potential upside is. Could this kind of spectacle, even with all its baggage, actually bring new fans to the sport?
You're saying the controversy, the questions about whether it was rigged, the personalities involved, you're saying all that actually brought more attention to boxing.
It's definitely a possibility. Remember, boxing has always had these larger-than-life figures. Muhammad Ali, he wasn't just a boxer, he was an icon. He brought a whole new level of attention to the sport. And a lot of that came from his personality, the controversies he stirred up.
So you're comparing Jake Paul to Muhammad Ali.
Maybe not in terms of skill or legacy, of course, but in terms of their ability to capture the public's imagination, to bring new eyes to boxing. I think there's some interesting parallels. Paul, with his YouTube fame, his self-promotion, he's tapped into this younger audience, the social media generation, people who might not otherwise be interested in boxing.
And maybe some of those viewers will stick around. They might start following other fighters, learning the techniques, appreciating the athleticism and the strategy of a real boxing match.
That's the hope, right? That this wave of interest, even if it was sparked by spectacle and controversy, it could translate into a genuine appreciation for the sport itself.
So maybe this isn't the death of boxing, like some people are saying. Maybe it's more of an evolution.
Evolution, I like that. Boxing has always adapted, found ways to stay relevant. And this new generation of fans, even if they come for the drama, they could be a catalyst for change, for positive change.
It's an interesting way to look at it. It's easy to focus on the negative, the potential damage this fight might have caused.
Right.
But it's important to see the potential benefits, too.
Absolutely. That's what we always encourage here on the Deep Dive. Critical thinking, looking at all sides of an issue. It's not always black and white. There's nuance, there's complexity, and sometimes, even in the most controversial events, there's a silver lining.
Well, you've given us a lot to think about today. This Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson fight, it's more than just a boxing match. It's a reflection of where boxing is right now.
And maybe a glimpse into where it's headed.
Exactly.
And ultimately, the future of boxing, it's in the hands of the fans. What kind of sport do they want? What do they value? Athleticism, competition above all else? Or are they open to something more entertainment-driven?
Some great questions. And speaking of questions, we want to hear from you, our listeners. What are your thoughts on the Paul Tyson fight? Do you think it was good for boxing, bad for boxing, somewhere in between?
Head over to our social media pages and let us know. We're always eager to hear your perspectives and, get a good debate going.
And who knows, maybe your comment will spark our next deep dive. But for now, that's it for this episode.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep those intellectual punches coming. And he didn't just talk the talk. Ali Walsh, he actually backed it up. He said he turned down a $3 million offer to fight Paul. Said, "How much does your pride cost?" Hey, that's a statement right there.
Yeah, it really makes you think about what matters more. You got Ali Walsh, so connected to the history of boxing, taking a stand like that, even if it means walking away from millions. And then you got Paul, who's all about shaking things up, challenging the status quo.
It's a fascinating dynamic for sure. And it all circles back to that question, was this fight rigged?
Yeah, was it?
And again, full transparency, we don't have any hard proof of a fix.
Right.
But when you factor in everything, the punch count, the no uppercut rumors, what Paul said afterwards.
It's hard not to be at least a little suspicious.
It really is.
Even Colin Cowherd, and he's not exactly known for being shy with his opinions. He said, and I quote, "By the 5th round, Jake Paul had a chance, and I wonder if he said, 'I'm not going to humiliate him.'" Like, wow, did that actually happen?
That quote, it really gets at the core of this whole thing, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Was there a moment where Paul decided to ease up out of respect because of some prearranged agreement? And if so, what does that mean for the sport?
Yeah, if fans start believing that these big fights are basically predetermined, it could really undermine the whole sport.
Absolutely. And it's not fair to the fighters who are grinding, working their way up, to think that the outcomes at the top level are maybe already decided.
It makes you wonder about where the entertainment aspect ends and where the integrity of the sport begins.
Right. Where's that line?
Yeah.
And how do we make sure it's not crossed?
Yeah. How do we do that?
I think the first step is talking about it openly and honestly. This Paul Tyson fight, with all the controversy, the speculation, it's brought these issues to the forefront. It's forcing us to confront these questions. What do we want boxing to be?
Yeah, do we want a sport where it's all about athleticism, skill, competition, or are we okay with it becoming more like pro wrestling, where it's more about the show, the entertainment value?
That's the debate we need to have. And it's bigger than just boxing. It's a question that applies to all sports in this day and age.
Oh, totally. Look at esports, MMA, even traditional sports like basketball, football.
Everything's changing.
The focus on spectacle, on creating these viral moments, it's changing how we consume and experience sports.
And with that shift, we have to consider the ethical implications. How much manipulation is too much? When does entertainment start to overshadow the integrity of the competition?
Those are some big questions.
Big questions with no easy answers.
So where do we go from here? This fight, it's more than just a boxing match. It's a reflection of where boxing is at this moment in time.
Yeah, and maybe a glimpse into where it's headed.
A lot to unpack.
A lot to unpack.
But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, what do you think about all this? If you could ask Jake Paul or Mike Tyson one question about this fight, what would it be? What are you most curious about?
Yeah, we want to hear from you. What's your burning question?
Let us know in the comments. Hit us up on social media. We love hearing your thoughts.
Always up for a good discussion.
And who knows, maybe your question will inspire our next deep dive.
We're always looking for interesting topics.
But before we sign off, I want to shift gears a bit. We've talked about the downsides of this fight, the questions it raises about the future of boxing.
But what if, and I know this might sound crazy, what if this whole spectacle, even with all the controversy, what if it could actually be good for boxing?
Okay, I'm intrigued. How could that be? How could a fight that many see as so damaging actually be beneficial?
Well, consider the audience, the sheer number of people who tuned in for this fight. People who might not normally watch boxing.
That's true. It was a huge event. Everyone was talking about it.
Exactly. And that's where the potential benefit lies. Could this kind of spectacle, even with all the baggage, could it bring new fans to the sport?
You're saying the controversy itself, the personalities, the questions about whether it was rigged, that all actually drew more attention to boxing.
It's possible. Boxing has always been about personalities, about creating buzz. Think about Muhammad Ali. He wasn't just a boxer, he was a global icon. He
Yeah,
transcended the sport.
he really did.
And a lot of that came from his personality, his willingness to speak his mind, the controversies he was involved in.
So you're comparing Jake Paul to Muhammad Ali.
Well, maybe not in terms of skill or accomplishment, obviously, but in their ability to capture the public's attention, to bring new eyes to boxing. I think there are some similarities.
I think what you're saying.
Paul, with his YouTube fame, his self-promotion, he's tapped into this whole new audience. Younger fans, people who are all about social media, people who might never have given boxing a second thought.
And maybe some of those people will become genuine fans.
That's the hope, right? That this initial interest, even if it was sparked by controversy, it could turn into a real appreciation for the sport.
So maybe it's not the end of boxing. Maybe it's more of a transformation, an evolution.
I like that, evolution.
Yeah.
Boxing has always been about adapting, finding ways to stay relevant. And these new fans, even if they come for the drama, they could be the driving force behind some positive changes.
It's definitely a different way to look at it. It's easy to get caught up in the negative, but there might be a silver lining here.
There might be. That's what we're all about here on The Deep Dive. Thinking critically, looking at things from multiple angles. It's not always black and white.
No, it's not.
There's nuance, there's complexity. And sometimes, even in the most controversial situations, there's something positive to be found.
Yeah, it's a lot to think about. I mean, this Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson fight, it's way more than just a boxing match at this point. It's a statement about the sport itself.
Yeah, where it is, where it's going.
Exactly.
And at the end of the day, the fans, they hold the power. What kind of boxing do they want to see?
Yeah, what do they value more? The pure athleticism or the entertainment side of it?
Big questions.
Big questions. And speaking of questions, we want to hear from you, our listeners. What are your thoughts on all this? This Paul Tyson fight, was it good for boxing, bad for boxing, somewhere in between?
Hit us up on social media. Let us know. We love hearing from you.
We do. Always up for a good debate.
Always.
And hey, maybe your comment will inspire our next deep dive. But for now, we're going to wrap things up. This has been another deep dive.
Thanks for listening, everyone.
Keep those brains working.
And we catch you next time.